Hey, everybody, welcome to Lando Lakers Live. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky coming to you after game two. The Lakers win this one. This was a fun game. It wasn't necessarily beautiful, Andy, but it was fun. 105-103, the final score. Of course, by now, everybody knows how it ended with the Anthony Davis buzzer-beating three, 2 seconds left in the game. Whoa, that was fun.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really thrilling ending and like a really thrilling last couple minutes to a game that was really sloppy, I think, by both teams in a lot of respects, but in particular for the Lakers.
Yeah.
You know, their execution over the course of this whole game left a lot to be desired. And I'm sure the film session is not going to be a lot of fun until you get to that final possession.
Well, look, I mean, this was one of those deals. I mean, the Lakers turned the ball over 23 times over the course of the game. You asked, Alex Caruso after the game talked about how, it was, then they were bad in the half court. And part of the reason they were bad, as AC said, was you don't get into a rhythm when you're constantly turning the ball over, when there's a foul somewhere, and then there's this and that. And it made them disjointed. And they looked, in the half court like the team kind of that we were worried about more at the beginning, of the playoffs where they didn't execute, because, that's what they became after the first quarter, I thought.
Yeah. I mean, it was a weird game for them offensively, just because pretty much from the outset of this game, the entire offense just seemed out of rhythm. They didn't really seem like they had any type of flow. They were carried in that first half a lot by LeBron, and then they were carried a lot in the second half by Anthony Davis, including LeBron, who said that after the game.
Absolutely.
But I mean, and some of that, because when I asked Alex Caruso about that after the game, I specifically said, beyond the turnovers, was there anything that you could account for in terms of just why the offense seemed so out of whack, basically from the jump? And he said that, honestly, a lot of it just was the turnovers, because you can't find a groove. So, we'll see what, if anything, from that carries over. But it was pretty striking from the beginning of this game, just how out of sorts they seemed in terms of getting their offense on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I thought where they did okay, because down the stretch, they were looking at it like, they keep letting Denver back in. They build a lead, they let Denver back in, and some of us give Denver credit. Obviously, by now we know they're really good. But I'm saying to myself, like, sort of like at the beginning of the Portland series, like, this is not a defense problem. This is not them defending Jokic poorly or Murray or whatever. Like, this is they can't score in the half court problem. I thought what they did really well early, despite some sloppy play, was they were able to push at a much better pace. Like, they pushed off made baskets early, 29 points in the first quarter, 31 in the second quarter. And a lot of that came despite the sloppiness, because they were able to move that pace along, and it just that disappeared in the second half. And so it was, I think to me, Andy, this was just a reminder that it's supposed to be hard. Like, the Lakers, the way they beat up on Portland toward the end, the way they took control of those Houston games, and won the last couple in very convincing fashion. And then they win game one of the conference finals against Denver. All of a sudden, it's like you kind of forget, like, it's supposed to be hard. And tonight it was. And I thought the fact that the Lakers came through in the way that they did, executing at the end, was impressive and encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you, in a lot of ways, expect from a championship caliber team. We've covered a lot of this stuff in the past, and I think, if you've ever just paid close attention to a team that won a championship and the run that they went on, they're not all going to be great games. Like, you're going to have a team that ends up winning a championship that at times doesn't look particularly good.
Yeah,
like, that's
absolutely.
the way this goes. I mean, like you said, it's supposed to be hard, but also what makes it difficult is just executing at that level, game in, game out. It is on a lot of levels, mentally, physically, all of that difficult. And Denver is a really good team, but what we've seen from this team over the course of this season is they're really resilient. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's fitting that they're playing a team like Denver that's become like the poster child for resiliency, having won 2 game 7s and come back from 2-3-1 deficits. But the Lakers have been really resilient this entire season. They've been through a lot. And, at the end of the day, they dominated game 1. And they did not play particularly well in game 2, and they squeaked by in thrilling fashion at the end to get that win. It's still 2-0. And it does, Miami could just as easily be down 1-2 or 0-3, I should say. Miami could be 0-3 right now, just as easily as they're 2-1.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't matter how you win those games.
No.
What matters is that you do it, and then you take the lessons from whatever happened.
And a quick reminder that, the Land O' Lakers Live and the Land O' Lakers podcast, always brought to you by the folks at Delicious Pizza, 2 locations, West Adams and in Hollywood. Tell them Cam Brothers sent you when you call your order in, or when you go pick it up in person. 20% off your pizza pies and all the other food that they make there. It's great food. Support your local businesses, support a local Lakers fan. So get out to Delicious Pizza. You want to talk about AD? Because obviously not just the fact that he hit the game winner and that play makes him sort of the topic of the night, but like this playoffs in a lot of ways to me is becoming like about Anthony Davis. And in some ways it was going in, it was going to be a litmus test on who he is as a superstar. And to say the least, Andy, he came through tonight, 31 points, 9 rebounds, and obviously the 2 buckets at the end, including the 3. I mean, this moment is one of those kind of, you could look back on this in 5-10 years, depending on where his career goes, and say, yeah, this was a pivot point.
Yeah, I mean, like if you wanted to try to make a comparison point, for example, you could look at, I want to say it was game 4. I'm not 100% sure, but in 2000, when the Lakers won the first of the three-peat titles against Indiana, and there was the game where Kobe had to take over because Shaq fouled out. And that was really like Kobe's true coming out moment. When, I mean, everybody knew even before that Kobe was a great player, that, he certainly seemed like he was on a path towards being, perhaps an all-time great player. But that moment was like really a coming out moment for him in terms of like, okay, we really see what this guy is about in these moments that truly, truly matter. Not that Kobe hadn't.
Because like you said, there's a difference between being great and there's then an all-time great, or an all-time great, but one who doesn't win 2 or 3 times. Charles Barkley and John Stockton versus Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but also too, like in particular, and this is why I'm also bringing it back to AD in this comparison point. It's not like Kobe during that 2000 run hadn't had great moments. I mean, one of the most indelible moments from that entire playoff run was the lob that he threw to Shaq in game 7 against Portland. There were plenty of great moments then, but this was a moment where Kobe picked up for Shaq, where the number 2 guy picked up for the number 1 guy not being there. And in this second half, again, by LeBron's own admission, AD carried the team. And by the team, LeBron very specifically included himself.
Yes.
Beyond just the game winner, it was that second half. As great as LeBron was in that first half, his presence wasn't felt nearly the same way in the second half. That was really Anthony Davis, and that's part of the whole story.
What makes it cool to me is, and I tweeted this during the game, like, we live in obviously a tear it down culture generally, but very much a tear it down sports culture, where the knives are out for guys who are going to be the quote unquote stars. The knives are out for you for the minute, and people are just waiting to see the failure come through. And if you don't perform, you get crushed for it. And one of the things just overall that I thought was great about this game, it was Jokic making awesome plays on one end, and then like Davis comes back and does it on the other. And like you had superstars achieving in tonight's game. So there is no, I mean, I guess unless you're a Plumlee, there's really no like, oh, that guy screwed up, and not even that, like, that was complicated, and so he made a mistake. Clearly,
I mean, look, you could put that as much on Mike Malone. Like, why are you putting that guy in cold?
All kinds.
I mean, there's a lot that can go into that.
All kinds of stuff, but like, that's a hard. It's a hard play. It's a bang. Clearly some sort of miscommunication there. This was a night of like not the whole game, but like by the end, it was like achievement down the stretch where it's like, look at that great player do that, and then look at that. So I really appreciated it in that regard. But for Davis, like, this is what he asked for. Like, he came to LA and he talked about it after the game. And I'll pull up the quote here. It's like, he says, I know the quote unquote pressure is going to be on us, going to be on me, especially the first year with everything that happened last year, and also playing along with Bron. But like, this is where he wanted to be, knowing that this was going to be the expectation. And for him to continually get better over the course of the playoffs. And so, he's rising to this challenge that he set for himself. I think it's such a great story, and it's great for the Lakers, obviously, but it's a great story at a time in sports where we don't get a lot of that. It's mostly tear the guy down after he fails. Kawhi Leonard, not a leader. Paul George can't hack it. All of this stuff.
Kawhi Leonard, 2-time Finals MVP.
MVP is apparently not enough of a leader anymore to be able to get the Clippers through. It's like, but Anthony Davis is rising to this. It could turn on a dime. I get that. There's still the rest of this series. There's the finals. But right now, at least, he is absolutely crushing it after putting himself in the hardest possible position. And I have an enormous amount of respect for that.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about it with Anthony Davis is that if you looked at his playoff history up until joining the Lakers, it was actually really good. Like, He didn't have a lot of playoff runs. Like, he didn't have a lot of sustained ones, and he only been there twice. And a lot of that was circumstantial. And you look at the context of the teams that he was with. He did not play with the Pelicans, with a lot of teams that really had any type of realistic business making a long playoff run. And there were injuries, often including Anthony Davis, that prevented that from happening. But his actual performances in the playoffs before joining the Lakers have actually been good. Like, he's not one of those guys where he joined and you wondered how he'd handle all this, because traditionally he shrunk in the playoffs. Sure. It was just, this is a brand new experience. He's never played with with a front runner. He's never played with an organization that people care as much as the Lakers. So how's he going to react to that?
Right. But there's a big difference between stepping up and performing with the Pelicans in a series where you beat Portland, then it's awesome, but like, literally nobody expects you to go very far, and it doesn't really matter.
Right. I mean, like, I don't want to take anything away from like Damian Lillard, because Damian Lillard has been an incredible he's been an incredible playoff performer. And I mean, every single team in the league would like cut off their arm to have Damian Lillard as part of their playoff roster.
Of course.
But, and he, he's been a franchise killer. I mean, like, he literally reshaped the Thunder, from hitting shots. But that being said, part of what has helped Damian Lillard in terms of that playoff perception is he's never played on a team that's been expected to win it all. Right. And again, I'm not taking anything away from him, because I guarantee if you put Lillard,
matters. That matters.
Yeah, I guarantee if you put Lillard on a front-running team, he would perform exactly the same. That is not a guy who wilts to pressure.
When LeBron,
but it affects his narrative.
Yeah, well, like when LeBron, I asked LeBron this question about AD. He spoke first tonight. He signed. LeBron is one of the few guys who I think can identify with this in the same way. And this is what he explicitly signed up for, particularly when going to Miami. He'd been in the playoffs before, but like, he put the target on himself going to Miami and said, if I do not, and then he really did it with, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 9, whatever it turned out to be.
Yeah, the monster truck and pep rally thing.
Right. The greatest show on wheels.
Bosh.
And so, like, he gets it. And, the part I asked him this question, and the part of it that I thought was really got to the core of it at the end was when he's like, this is something that for all the people sitting at home, that watch it and judge. He said anybody can talk from outside, but if they got into the ring or they got into the arena, probably 10 times out of 10, they shit their pants. In this particular case, in the transcript, it says expletive their pants, but I know what he said, Andy. So it's like, he's right. And to volunteer for that is and then perform is to say something. And I thought it really put it in perspective too. I saw Tanya Ganguly tweet out the quote that you referenced, from the Times, referenced that, that LeBron said that AD dragged him through the second half. It's a reminder. One of those two guys is the second best player on this team
on any given night.
Right. But sure. But one of those two, however you want to categorize it, the when, the where, whatever. One of those two is the second best player on the team. That's why the Lakers should win a title this year, because we were talking about this, I think, the other day, right? Who is the third best player left in the playoffs?
Third best player left in the playoffs?
In the playoffs. Is it Jokic? Is it Jimmy Butler?
It's Jokic.
Okay.
I think Jokic has been a monster in the playoffs, particularly the last series.
Right. But it's Jokic, it's
Jason Tatum, OC Lakers.
So that suggests Jason Tatum.
Sure.
On the chat board.
I would say Jokic, but those are good suggestions.
Right. Those are really the three guys you can choose from. Jamal Murray has played really well. I don't know if he's that guy.
No.
Those guys, I live on Denver Island and I love Nikola Jokic. He's not Anthony Davis or LeBron James. He's easily a top 10 player in the league.
Yeah, he's moving up. But
he's not as good as those guys. And
he's not.
That, tonight we saw what can happen when the supporting cast struggles a little bit. There are ways to beat the Lakers and all that, but the Lakers are prohibitive favorites now and should be to win a title because they have, without question, the two best players left in the playoffs. It's not close.
They do. But this was also too why I hadn't been as worried as some people in terms of the supporting cast,
right?
Because the drop off between AD and whoever you consider the number 3 on this team, just because it tends to be your stars that make or break you in terms of your overall playoff picture. The supporting cast needs to come through. Those guys need to make sure they're carrying their own weight, just so it isn't too much on the rest of them. But it is rare. It's rare in a game, much less, multiple games over the course of a series or a playoff run, where the number 3 guy or the number 4 guy, some solid complementary player is somebody that regularly carries a team when their stars aren't performing. That just doesn't really happen. With the Clippers, for example. I remember you and I had this discussion on a few podcasts. The idea that the Clippers' depth, which I think on paper it could be superior than the Lakers. Not defensively, but I think if you just look at overall, it may be superior. But I never bought into the idea that Lou Williams, if say Kawhi and Paul George were having a bad game, that Lou was going to be able to carry them. I'm like, no, he's not. Because he's never done that in the playoffs, and he's not that caliber of player. Like we saw in Game 7, if Paul George and Kawhi Leonard both don't play well, this series was an extreme version because Lou Williams just didn't play well the whole series.
Right, and Trez was bad the entire series and all that stuff.
Lou's playoff history has not been great because Lou is a really good six man, and he's a really good scorer off the bench, microwave type. But he's not that caliber of player.
I think the other side of that is it doesn't have to be when your stars aren't carrying. It's when your stars are playing pretty well or they're having a good game. Maybe your stars are competing as well. And then you inject a Lou Williams and Trez are there playing well. It's when those guys are playing well, they can elevate you above. I don't think it's so much carrying your stars when they're not, although that can be a thing. You get a bad quarter from Paul George and Lou goes off with, with 3 triples or whatever it might be, that could be enough to sustain you. But it's the fact that if sort of everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, then these guys bring something that you may not be able to counter. And what changed for the Clippers, obviously, is those guys didn't bring that thing. And then,
Bring
Paul
a damn
George,
thing.
no,
They didn't bring anything.
Paul George was, Paul George was Paul George. Like, he had some good moments and he had some really shaky, playoff moments, and I'm at least a little bit more sensitive talking about it, because like he was very open about some of the mental stuff and the strain that he was going through. But be it as it may, whatever the reasons, and there are legitimate mitigating circumstances, he did not play well enough, often enough, I think, for the Clippers. I think that's fair. That hasn't happened for the Lakers. Like, they really haven't been in a position where LeBron and AD haven't performed well enough that you needed Lou Williams, whoever that would be, or Montrezl Harrell, whoever that would be, to come through. And
no, I mean, look, Kyle Kuzma is the closest thing you would come to like a prototype number 3 on the Lakers. His scoring presence has not been a factor at all in the playoffs. I mean, he's been very good defensively. Like, I don't think he's been a minus. Like, he didn't have a great game tonight, but I think by and large, Kuz has been fine and he's found ways to contribute, but not as a scorer. I mean, he has not really had much of a presence that way. And by definition, it hasn't really been damaging the Lakers. You know, I mean, clearly they're up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals.
Well, and I think what helps too is I think part of the reason they're so confident, this is something that we've talked about with Vogel, throughout the bubble and all that. Their confidence as a group obviously is centered in, we've got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Like, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is, their confidence isn't really founded on being able to go get buckets. It's being able to lock down defensively when they know they need to. Like, they know when they need to crank it up. If they need 7 minutes of elite defense to get through something, to shut it, they know they absolutely believe they can do it. And that's a different kind of swagger than, we have a bunch of guys who can go get buckets. And I think the Clippers thought they were able to do that. And part of the reason I think they struggled so much in the playoffs is that defensive switch never was there for them. Whereas the Lakers have been pretty crappy at moments offensively, but have been almost universally good on the other end. So they always know that's there.
Here's a question from OC Laker Fanatics. How much do you think Kobe was in the mind of AD when he took that last shot? The answer is
question.
A lot.
Yes.
A lot. I mean, he confirmed this afterwards, that, there was speculation on Twitter that he had mouthed Kobe after he hit that shot, and he confirmed that he did. And Frank Vogel said afterwards, or he had been mic'd up and he had described it as a Mamba shot. And he talked about how that type of shot embodied everything that Kobe stood for as a player and strove to be, in terms of winning and in terms of rising up when your team needs you the most. And it's funny. I mean, I know you and I, heading into these playoffs, we talked a lot about, Kobe being at the forefront of all these players' minds. And, you would understand why. And it speaks to, this team and Frank Vogel and the coaching staff and the entire organization, how much they really want to try to honor Kobe with the championship. But whether that would become too much of a thing.
That was my big question. Is that,
I know,
is it going to be a boost or is it going to be a burden? And I think tonight, is tonight, as much as any, I think we really saw the answer is the latter. It's not a burden. It's a boost. It is not the pressure, I think, that they're feeling of, like, if we don't win for Kobe, we're failures or whatever, but there's just a lift. I mean, there's a lot, they're 3-0 in the jerseys. They're, you got AD yelling that at the end. That's not the actions of a team that feels burdened by something, that feels overwhelmed by something. And they really have channeled it, I think, in a very positive way.
Well, I mean, the word you keep using, burden. I don't think they see it that way.
I 100%
They
agree
see
now.
it right. I'm just adding on to that. I mean,
Sure.
it's clearly something that's inspiring them, but not in a way that creates pressure that starts turning it into. I don't think that they see it as they will have failed Kobe if they don't win this championship, which
Correct.
would have been the most negative way that they could have gone into this, like in terms of turning that memory and that mission statement into something that just overwhelms them, and envelops them in ways that just create it too much. That hasn't been the case. Like, it seems like it's really something that inspires them. It seems like they really feel Kobe's presence. And, all of these guys.
You understand why I was worried that it could be.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very reasonable thing to be concerned about. But I mean, I think between all the guys on this team, like LeBron or Anthony Davis, who had a very positive relationship with Kobe, or, Rajon Rondo had a very good relationship with Kobe, or guys like Kuzma or Quinn Cook, who just absolutely idolized him, or somebody like Dwight Howard, who I think has a lot of, misgivings in terms of the way they didn't get the closure that he wanted. All of them have this very specific relationship to Kobe that I think could drive them in ways that aren't negative, or where it feels like something being put on their shoulders. So it's like, well, why? Like, this shouldn't be on us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, where it feels unfair.
Remind me to come back to something. I just saw a stat go through that I think is absolutely staggering. Okay. So I don't want to derail this conversation because I think it's an important one, but like, just remind me what's that thing before we're done?
I wrote remind on a piece of paper.
Very good. So, but what I think is, I hope I express this in a way that makes sense to people who are listening. What I think is great about the way that the Kobe part of this has played out through the playoffs is it really has been something that has, at least to me, who does kind of look at stuff sometimes with a cynical eye, worry about exploitation of stuff like this. I don't like forced patriotism. This stuff makes me uncomfortable. I really feel like it has been portrayed in a very positive way. It doesn't feel like the influence and the way Kobe is talked about in this series and the way it's talked about on Brian. Nothing about it feels exploitative or cheap or whatever. Like, when they wear the uniforms, it's talked about, it's whatever, but like, no, it doesn't feel to me like anybody's even connected to like talking about the playoffs or sort of mining or exploiting, the storyline here in ways that at least to me would be like uncomfortable or off-putting.
I remember when you and I were doing shows for 710, the week of Kobe's death, or even like a couple weeks, like the week of and like the week following. Right. I remember you and I even talked about this on air, like the idea of being concerned that you could be perceived as trying to milk this, and in either of our cases, and I think anybody that we were working with on air, that wasn't the case. I mean, I think,
like, what's the line? Like, what's the line
exactly.
between talking about stuff that people want to talk about and like, hey guys, let's keep talking about Kobe because it's great for ratings.
Right. And you don't want to be perceived that way.
No.
Because the truth is, I mean, we learned this as somebody who covered 10 years of Kobe's career. There is no such thing as a discussion about Kobe that will not get clicks, that will not get ears, that will not get eyes.
When we talk about Kobe on this show, on this podcast, when we do late night happy hour, whatever, when Kobe's name comes up, people engage longer. They talk like, and you need to know that. You need to be aware of that when you come into it.
Right. But it hasn't felt that way at all. I mean, and I think it's a credit to the Lakers. I think it's a credit to the league and to all the people involved with this. And I think it reflects a real sincerity in terms of how people feel about it. I mean, I think his death really touched the entire league. Like, it really touched the entire basketball universe. And I think that's led to a tone it's been very appropriate.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
worked very well.
And it's oddly kind of against type in the way the world works now.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure it's something we'll come back to, but tonight really was one of those kind of, again, sort of indelible moments. They're wearing the jerseys. You hear that, you see AD, do what he did after that. So it was pretty cool. I thought I wanted to get to this because I thought the question of Dwight Howard, both in this series and in tonight's game, obviously everybody knows what he did in game one. We got this from Ranzabar on the chat. Oops, sorry, I missed that. Sorry, from Moheezy on the chat. What do you guys make of Vogel not playing Dwight in the third quarter? He basically did Vogel tonight. Dwight played a little less, correct?
Yes, he only played 13 minutes.
13 minutes. He ended up with 5 fouls versus, closer to, it was like 25 in game one, something like that. I think a lot of it was matching up that second shift for Jokic, because I think what they saw from Dwight in game one was that the way he was going to play was just balls out, bonkers energy. And the line between that being really effective and that being a little too much is thin. And I thought tonight Jokic did a better job with Dwight. But mostly I think they feel like they can't ask him to do that for much more than like 15, 20 minutes a night. And so you knew in the second quarter when Jokic came back in for his second shift, Dwight would come back in. They did it again in the fourth and then pulled Dwight at the end, which I thought was the right thing to do. But like Dwight's energy is impossible not to watch. Even when like good stuff is happening, bad stuff, like you cannot stop watching Dwight when he's on the floor in this series. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. Like the game within the game matchup of just specifically Dwight's minutes against Jokic and how Dwight goes about trying to use them, how Jokic reacts to them, like you said, better in game two. And he actually started doing a better job of getting Dwight in foul trouble as opposed to game one where, Dwight was a foul drawing magnet. He drew the third foul on Jokic, Murray, and Paul Millsap, all in, I think, one half. Like it was pretty amazing. But, it wasn't quite as effective in game two. I think, to your point, Vogel may recognize that there's an element of less is more.
Right.
And I think they also felt, too, that they could get away more in this game with playing JaVale. Like, JaVale, for example, played in the second half. Like he didn't play in the second half until garbage time of game one. So that's naturally going to eat into some of Dwight's minutes, because he started the second half of game one, and that wasn't the case tonight. So it'll be interesting to see how it is moving forward.
It is, the energy is sort of almost manic in that regard. Do you want to do the thing that I was reminding you to do?
Picked up 5 fouls in 13
like
minutes.
13 minutes. And like it is, but it is a really, I mean, I feel like Frank Vogel is very sensitive to it. Like it can shift really fast. And actually, I thought it was really cool. Like, I forget who tweeted it out. It might have been Dave Dufour at The Athletic or one of those guys who, are smart dudes. Between Malone playing Dozier, Vogel being kind of very liberal with his rotations, you see Spo doing different things. And like, there are 4 coaches in the playoffs right now who are not dogmatic about how they do stuff. And like, they will change things, shift things.
Kind of miss Nick Nurse. Kind of missing Nick Nurse in that regard.
Yeah. So there's that. But anyway, you want to do the thing?
Yeah.
This is a staggering.
Hey, Brian, remind you, there was a stat you wanted to get to. Also, a reminder, the podcast and the live show brought to you by Delicious Pizza. 2 locations, West Hollywood and West Adams. 20% off your order with the password Cam Brothers. You are supporting a local business. You are supporting a local business of somebody who loves the Lakers. He is every bit as a fanatic as everybody in this chat right now, everybody listening to this podcast. So do it.
This tweet from the Lakers: how many in the entire rich history of the Lakers, where they play every year and they, half the time end up in the finals and, 16 times win the final. They have played a lot of playoff games, like a lot. Andy, how many buzzer beaters, like game-winning buzzer beaters, have there been in Lakers playoff history? How many would you guess? including tonight.
Man, I'm thinking about it now. I mean, the
Yeah,
only
but
one
I'm not talking about the finals. I mean,
no.
all the rounds.
I mean, off the top of my head, the only other one I can remember is Artest's putback. Like, that's one of the only ones I can actually remember. I mean, there's that. There's
Nathan
point,
Mark
there's point
joining
four.
us from New Zealand, probably 200 to 300.
There's 0.4. That was a buzzer beater, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes. There was Meta's putback.
Mm-hmm.
AD. So I'm gonna say, because it sounds from your tone that it's low.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, it wouldn't be that phenomenal if there's been, say, 700 of them.
Correct.
It wouldn't be really
I
that.
mean, yes. I mean, the way I asked the question did give some of it
You
away.
did sort
There's
of
no
lead
question.
the witness.
It is not 300.
I'm gonna say 7.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
7. But
Look at this guy.
You understand why I found that to be a little bit shocking. I mean, maybe I shouldn't in hindsight, but it's AD, Meta, which you mentioned, Kobe. I think that's the Phoenix game, right?
Yes, Kobe had the Phoenix game. Yes,
right. Fish 0.4, Ori,
yeah, Sacto, West's half court heave. People are mentioning
Baylor.
Wow, that's
7.
it.
7.
That's amazing,
isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
I just maybe I shouldn't be
my
so
God, Damian
blown by that, but I kind of am.
Damian Lillard has 2 on his own.
Right. Like that, like send teams packing. Like he has 2 like walk off like buzzer beaters. Like seriously, like in the Lakers, you would just think there. I mean, I realize these are sort of rare and all that kind of stuff. And buzzer beater is very specific. It doesn't mean like there can't be any time left on the clock. I get all that, but just that seemed really low to me.
That does feel low.
I just thought that was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, then this will be. I mean, especially assuming you end up getting a championship out of it, this will be remembered. I mean, I think people sometimes forget that 0.4 didn't lead to a title. It led to going to the finals where they eventually lost. But it was such an amazing moment. Everybody still remembers it.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, it was 0.4 was like the greatest thing of all time, I guess, until 0.5 sort of swung it for Toronto and kept them in the series that they ended up actually winning.
Well, also too, I mean, 0.4 was very, very exciting because it was all through the prism of, well, they're definitely going to beat Detroit.
Right.
I mean, that part of the reason everybody got so excited by it is it really felt like the Lakers were going to win a championship.
Yeah. And it was, what's funny about all this stuff too is like it seems like now it's like the Lakers, there is all this concern that the Lakers could somehow start like taking their foot off the gas or take Denver, start taking them lightly, because they're up and this and that. And literally they can't, because every question they get asked tomorrow is, they're the comeback guys and all this. Just once I would like to be like, oh yeah, we totally, like some player, yeah, they're done.
Dude,
they've completely given up.
Denver? Come on,
fuck
man.
that. They're done.
Come on.
Really? Like they couldn't forget if they because it's the only question they're going to be asked between now and the end of the series.
Guys, like, have you seen them and have you seen us? Like, come on.
We are so much better than them.
Like LeBron be like, look, dude, look it up. I own Paul Millsap. Seriously, that dude, I own him. Like, come on. Like, really?
Oh, man.
Yeah. This is a great point from
right.
Where's Andrew Bynum? He would say they're done. God. Real quick, I just want to tell this story because it always makes me laugh, and then we can wrap. In 2010, when the Lakers eventually ended up playing Boston, they had actually punched their ticket against Phoenix before, I think it was Orlando and Boston had wrapped up their series. So naturally, all these players are getting asked the totally cliched question of, who would you rather face, Orlando or Boston? And, everybody to a man is just doing the cliched answer. We want to really think about it. Both teams are really great. We focus on ourselves, that whole thing. And everybody knows the answer is Boston because A, it's Boston, and B, they had just had their asses handed to them like 2 years previous by Boston, 39-point Game 6 loss. They were humiliated and depantsed and emasculated, everything. Everybody knows the damn answer is Boston. Finally, God bless Andrew Bynum, who has no filter whatsoever. He gets asked the question. He goes, "Oh yeah, Boston, we want those guys."
I mean, it was so funny. Like when he was younger, like John Black, who was the PR guy at the time, used to get so mad at us because he'd be like, "Guys, you're like exploiting him." He was like, "John, we're just asking." We asked him like, "What'd you have for lunch today?" And he reveals like state secrets about what's going on inside. Like, John, we're just asking the kid questions, like, and they're not even probing questions.
And also, too, I mean, like at that point, Bynum was in the league like
I mean, even earlier in his career, like he
never had
the moment he walked into LA until he was done.
Yeah, that kid, like we talk all the time about athletes, and like there are certain athletes that have a perception of just don't give a fuck what you think. Like they don't give a fuck what fan thinks. But the truth is, most athletes do. Like even somebody like most people do, most athletes do. Like even somebody like Kobe, who had that reputation, Black Mamba, doesn't care. He marketed unpopularity. Kobe did though care. Like, I mean, he cared what people thought, if for no other reason than he was looking for the best way to use that for his marketing. Andrew Bynum truly did not give a fuck what you thought.
He was YOLO before it was fashionable.
I mean, like he didn't care what his teammates thought.
He was YOLO. It was like YOLO squared. I mean, that guy.
Bynum was up there with like Rasheed Wallace, with really not caring.
Not always in a positive way, by the way, but always in an entertaining way. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to be the guy's teammate, but I enjoyed covering him.
No, I actually thought, and my theory with Andrew Bynum down the stretch of his career, because I agree, like by the time the Lakers traded him, it was time for him to go. I think that was fair to say. He had worn out his welcome.
It had run its course.
Yes,
whatever it was, it had run its course.
And it seemed like running its course was something that happened in other spots as well. But Bynum was such a good quote. I mean, he was an amazing quote. He should have just worked for every team and just done post-media sessions for all 30 teams. And he would just fly around the entire league just taking questions.
Yeah.
Because he was amazing.
I felt that way about like Jamal in a different way. Like Jamal Crawford should just be assigned for a week to every team in the league. He's to bring joy to people.
Crawford's the total opposite. Crawford's maybe the greatest teammate to ever walk the earth.
Right. Absolutely. He is a joy spreader. Will Barton, if he wasn't so valuable to the Nuggets, would be perfect. He remembers the 3-pointer that got him benched by Mike Brown. It was all brilliant.
His game.
Yeah. Quick again, Delicious Pizza, 20% off when you use Cam Brothers as a password. 2 locations, West Adams and in Hollywood off of Sunset. Great pizza. Reminder this week, obviously, Andy, we're going to do a lot of basketball on the late night happy hour every night at 10 o'clock. Tomorrow night, Bill Oram from The Athletic. Monday night, Bill Oram from The Athletic. Tuesday, Matt Moore from the Action Network, formerly of CBS, great basketball writer. Wednesday, we're aiming for Ohm Youngmisuk at ESPN. Thursday, Dragonfly Jones. So we got a lot of great NBA stuff lined up for you, as obviously NBA really is the big story. And we're hoping actually we turn back to the NFL on Friday with Lindsey Theory, who is always great, and the Rams looking really good. 2-0 so far. So that's been fun. All right, so we'll be back tomorrow night for late night happy hour and talking a lot of game 2 on Tuesday with Matt Moore on the late night happy hour here on the late night happy hour. That was inelegant. We'll see everybody. Right. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Bye.